government. But in the studio is somebody who knows the in and out of the matter we are coming to discuss this afternoon, Dr. Donkor. He's a former power minister and also member of the Mines and Energy Committee. This is his area, and so he understands the issues much better. And so, how are you also feeling it? You can join us with your contribution via our Facebook and YouTube pages with your comments on bringing it to our viewers this afternoon. Dr. Donkor, you're welcome to the post.
Thank you.
So, I've heard two things. Before we get to what you've been told in the last 3 days, Mr. Atacha says that in the last 70 years, they've managed to ensure reliability in power supply. Last week, there was a tweet from Gabi Asare who says that he was surprised that the Akufo-Addo government, despite COVID and all the economic difficulties that the country has went through in the last 7 years, managed to, ensure power supply. And he was unsure what really is happening right now. 7 years of power, and then about to exit power, they are facing challenges. And some will look at it and say that they may be sabotaged somewhere. What is your response to this political angle to the matter before we get to the real issues?
Well, I am quite surprised about this consistent claim that 7 years of uninterrupted power. If viewers will recall the saying "Doom see,"
right,
it arose out of a certain situation. If you tell the people of Kumasi, for example, that we've had 7 years of uninterrupted power, they would challenge, to be charitable, your assertion. We haven't had 7 years of uninterrupted power.
But it is worse now than...
Yeah, indeed. When the media took on the minister, challenged the minister, he was trying to make a difference between what prevailed prior to 2016 and what was then happening last year and the year before. And so he labeled it Doom see.
Right.
Because there were outages. So let's not gloss over that. Currently, there is a challenge. Of course, the energy sector is a very dynamic sector. Today, you may not have outage, tomorrow you will have it. It is for this reason that we have a reserve margin. Today, we have serious challenges with outages. If you take yesterday, for example, somebody will say, oh, there's no outage yesterday, apart from localized faults. But that will be papering over the crack.
Because localized fault is also outage.
But there was load shedding yesterday, except that the burden of the load shedding was put on our neighboring countries. At a point, we were exporting zero to one of our neighboring countries. And it has such dangerous implications for the welfare of the energy sector and even for Ghanaians as a people. For example, Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, other than solar, is totally dependent on power from Ghana.
100%.
100%. If you give Burkina Faso, Sonabel, zero, whether peak or off-peak, it means they are in darkness.
Yeah, you are plunging the whole, the capital of Burkina Faso, of Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso into darkness.
It has both economic and security implications, as well as even strategic implications. Let's take the strategic implication first. If I were Burkinabe, or was in the leadership of Burkinabe, one I would say supply from Ghana is unreliable. Why don't you look for alternate sources? And the alternate sources could be building more dams, mini dams in Burkina. Remember, the Volta takes a source outside Ghana.
Right.
So if they begin to build more dams,
it will affect
our generation. So we must always have that in mind.
But, Doctor, is that what is happening now, that we are curtailing power to our neighboring countries?
We are curtailing.
So therefore, the present directive is now in force.
Well, the interesting thing is that the Ministry of Energy says on record it has not received that directive. VRA, obviously an agency under the ministry, says it has not. However, there are some other claims in the public domain that such a directive was issued.
Right.
And yesterday, as I stated, the export to a particular country was zero at a certain period, which means whether by default or by design, that a directive is being implemented. And it was so short-sighted. Okay, in order to boost domestic supply, let's breach our contractual obligations.
But wouldn't that come with implications?
Absolutely. And that was why I was saying that it has economic as well as security implications.
Right.
The economic implication is that both VRA and GridCo have to go out of Ghana to seek finance, to finance projects. These projects are financed on the basis of their forex inflows. Because of the power we export, they receive payment in foreign exchange.
Right.
So this serves to finance the debt capital. And therefore, if this ceases, we'll be in default. And once,
in terms of paying the loan.
Yes. Once we get into default, the implication is that in future it's going to be so difficult coming up with new projects to expand and to stabilize the grid. So it is very short-sighted. Whoever, the advisors advising His Excellency the President on this are not doing that in the national interest. They are doing that in the interest of temporal political gain that is counter to the national interest.
But Doctor, correct me if I'm wrong, but the information we have is that the total power we export is around 250 megawatts. Compared to the deficit,
it's above that.
It's about 250 megawatts.
Yes. You see, for the last 3 months, arising out of this load shedding, we have also shed some exports. That is acceptable. We have shared some export. But if we are to stop export totally, first, one, they will be looking for alternative supply routes.
So in future, they cannot rely on
Precisely.
you for power supply.
A good example is that Nigeria can supply some of these countries. Nigeria supplies about 6 cents per kilowatt hour. Ghana is exporting around 10 cents. They prefer supply from Ghana because it's stable. So if we lose that brand advantage, we are no longer going to have.
And the way things are going, it is possible we may lose it.
Yes, if we continue with this and this directive, let me be careful with my choice of word. This directive that is misinformed in terms of the national interest, we'll lose that. Fortunately for me, as I sit here, as a student of energy policy,
right,
I see an attempt at reversal. Once the ministry says it is not aware
of the directive,
and VRA also says they have not received, there is a certain rethink
around the whole area.
And so it's a retreat.
But Doctor, what does this tell of our strategy to address this matter head on? We have internal issue, we have home challenges, and yet exporting power appears to be one of the solutions we are considering. It tells you that we are not really fixing the core of the challenge that faces.
Yeah, there are a number of challenges causing it. But for example, VRA spends a minimum of $30 million a month paying for gas supply. A minimum.
$30 million?
Yes, a minimum. Gas supply from Nigeria and gas.
Annually, monthly?
Monthly.
Okay.
A minimum. VRA has to finance this purchase. They finance this from the export revenue. And therefore, if we take away the export revenue, they are not going to finance this from cedis. In any case, for export revenue, we get total payment and payment on time. For domestic supply, we are in deficit because we are totally under recovering cost. ECG, both ECG and GridCo are unable to collect what they have to collect. Take away technical losses.
Which is 30%, as we have been told.
That is a combination of technical and commercial. But at least if you give them 11% technical losses, it means we are unable to account for 19% of what we duly bill. That is account for it. Then actual payment is even different from accounting for it.
And the reason is that when people take the power and they don't pay?
One, people steal power. And there's no other charitable word to use. People, and when I say people, this includes companies. Because some companies, factories have been caught stealing power. That is one. Two, our collection, methods of collection are so inefficient. Three, there are meters that are not working. So people are consuming power. They are not stealing, but they are not being billed.
Yes, and that is ECG's issue.
Yes. And then four, there are those who have been billed and have not paid. And so in recent times, ECG has had to cut off power to entities that are owing.
Including state-owned enterprises.
Including state-owned. In fact, they did to Parliament, and I was very pleased about that.
Okay, so now let's talk about what you were told at this meeting. You met ECG. What is ECG's challenge?
Well, ECG's challenge, basically, one is supply. They are not getting any supply. They are not receiving enough power to distribute. That was established. They are not receiving enough. Yes, they may have some operational challenges, a few transformers. For example, if you say 630 transformers are overloaded and you are working on that, and we are told largely all of them have been fixed, largely. The 630 looks huge in isolation. But if you consider the fact that ECG has over 32,000 transformers,
that it makes the 600 very insignificant.
Insignificant. And the 600 cannot have the impact that you and I are feeling. So it's been established that there's a supply shortfall because we are not generating enough.
And that is the issue with GridCo and VRE.
Yes. No, GridCo does not come in.
Right.
GridCo is a kayayi. You give me 5 yams to deliver to a buyer in the market, I carry the 5 yams. It is only when I fall and 1 yam breaks that I am accountable. But as long as I deliver the 5 yams, I'm not accountable.
So we have VRE, we have independent power producers.
Yes.
What is
IPPs and VRE? They are the generators. So this whole attempt to shift the blame to GridCo is one, unscientific, and two, misplaced.
So again, let's look at the IPPs and VRE. Gas and inability to procure fuel the only challenge, the reason why we are in darkness? No.
There is a challenge with some of the plants, actual generation. Yes, in my estimation, 70% of the problem will have been fuel driven. But there's also the 30%. A number of plants are out they are not generating because some are on planned maintenance, others are on unplanned maintenance, etc. So plant availability is also a question. But it is for this reason that we have a reserve margin.
Right.
So if all things were working right, 1, 2, 3 plants going down, particularly in a year where we have had excess rainfall, and therefore the reservoir is more than excellent. Because they are ramping up Akosombo to about 900 megawatts. And I haven't seen that in a very long time. But it's because the reservoir is very good. So we should not have this. So we need to be candid with the Ghanaian people. Look, nation, we have a challenge. One, we are under recovering cost. And for any business, if you are putting in more than you are taking out in terms of revenue, ultimately it will impact on you. Your working capital will diminish and your ability to buy the consumables, such the fuel and the rest that you need.
So therefore, government cannot continually push money into the sector, and yet the returns doesn't even make up for how much was invested.
Yeah, it's not just government, the Ghanaian people, because yes, government is supporting fuel purchase by about 200 to 250 million cedis a month. Government has to do this because largely we are under recovery. And when we are under recovering, then the state has to step in. But this is money that ought to have gone into Chief's compound. This is money that...
now going to the power sector.
Yes, this is money that ought to have gone to education. This is money that ought to have gone into agriculture, into internal security, etc. So it's going to power sector. If the sector was efficient, but the waste in the sector and the inefficiencies in the sector makes it impossible to even recoup the money that is going in.
That is going into it.
But there is also a responsibility of government. To be fair, the macroeconomy, particularly monetary policy, it is managed by government, either Ministry of Finance or the Bank of Ghana. When you have your currency deteriorating at the rate at which it has deteriorated in the last year, it's going to have impact on your prices, particularly in a sector, as I consistently say, where your payables are dollar denominated.
Right.
We pay for the fuel in dollars. We pay the IPP in dollars. We bring in parts in dollars. And yet our receivables are in cedis. And so when there is such a deterioration arising out of mismanagement of the macroeconomy, the government cannot escape blame.
But again, if we want to look at the role of ECG in this, did you get the impression that they are working hard to reduce the inefficiencies from their own part?
Well, let's be fair, it is not only ECG. ECG, NETCO. NETCO covers about 64% of the landmass of Ghana.
And I was going to ask you whether the doomsday is also being experienced as it is experienced.
Absolutely. In fact, it's
in your part, which is under the control of VRA.
It's worse in my constituency than it is in Accra.
Okay. Yeah. So let's deal with the inefficiencies and whether you get the assurance that they are working to deal with it.
Yeah, there are inefficiencies. There are those inefficiencies which arise out of managerial lapses. Those we will have to push and reduce them. Unfortunately, as I have said, too many decisions in the Ghanaian space are procurement driven. We'll have to tackle that. But there are also those inefficiencies that, which arise out of a failure to inject capital. And that we cannot hold the utilities alone responsible. Shareholders must inject capital, especially when it comes to equipment. For example, as we speak, GridCo owes VRA, even though it doesn't buy from VRA. It owes VRA because it's been contracted to, for the sake of, let me use layman's term so that it has been contracted to carry load from VRA to ECG and to NETCO. Then, along the way, part of the load is missing, which we call transmission losses.
Right.
And so, by contract, VRA will bill GridCo. You charge me to carry this from Accra to Kumasi. It gets to Kumasi and there's a shortage, so you pay for it. So GridCo, as we speak, owes VRA.
By how much are you aware of this figure?
In excess of 100 million cedis. Okay. In excess. I'm just being conservative.
And this as a result of transmission losses?
Precisely. But GridCo can cure this by injection of capital in the form of better equipment, expanding their transmission capacity. For example, moving a lot from 161 to 330 kV lines, etc. But that needs money.
Right.
So there is part of the inefficiency that needs to be addressed through capital injection, through finance.
But Doctor, the issue about the efficiency on the part of ECG, if they are able to deal with this matter, the outcome will be that the cash waterfall mechanism, the details of it will be respected.
Yeah, it will be better populated because as you get more efficient, you get more revenue.
Exactly.
So the cash waterfall mechanism will be better populated.
What is the state of it as we speak?
Well,
PRC
for the month of March,
ECG is misbehaving in terms of the distribution of the cash to the players.
For the month of March, ECG has started complying, and the results show. Okay. So hopefully that compliance will continue. But we have real issues in the sector.
Tell me about them.
One is the debt stockpiling.
Currently stands as over what? The debt in the energy sector?
Yes.
Over 1.4 or 6 billion.
About $1.5 billion and growing. That is the worry. For example, if you take payment to IPPs, there's been an arrangement to restructure. So ECG is virtually guaranteeing $43 million every month payment. The $43 million does not cover all of the invoices. They have agreed to restructure the rest for another 4 years, which means the next government, and this is monthly,
right?
Which means the next government will not just inherit the $1.5 billion as we know today, but every month will also inherit.
Because there's always a carryover.
There's a carryover. So my biggest worry is the debt stockpile for the next government.
And that gives the indication that this on and off light situation is not going to be resolved anytime soon. Well,
it can be resolved, but at the expense of some other projects and some other programs, if it's the fuel. So first of all, we must tackle the question of collection, and not just collection, even procurement. Seriously, we must have a plan to drive down cost. If you're running any business and your revenue is deteriorating, in real terms, the revenues are deteriorating, notwithstanding whatever adjustment PURC does. Because in dollar terms, there's a deterioration of revenue. So if you are not growing your revenue in real numbers, then you have to look at your cost. How do we drive down cost?
Did you direct ECG to publish a load management timetable?
I don't speak for the committee. I am not in the leadership of the committee, so I'm very careful.
I was asking whether such directive
I thought I heard the chairman in your interview saying that was done.
Because the ECG, also from the same clip you heard from the ECG managing director, he makes the point that they are not sharing load, and for that reason, a timetable may not be necessary.
You see, if they said, it depends on the type of timetable.
Such that I can plan my life and know that I'll be off today or have light tomorrow, so that I can plan accordingly.
If I heard right, the position espoused by the chairman was that at least notification. You should be notified. It may not be a month's timetable, If you're going to have an outage in your area, in these days of technology, since payments are even being made via mobile phones, people in that captive area should be notified. Yes, there is the need for notification so that we can plan our lives. If the ECG MD says there's no load shedding, today, this morning, it is possible that there's no load shedding in the ECG operational zone today because we have shared a load of export with serious dire consequences on the political economy, not just on the macroeconomy, on the political economy.
Right.
If our neighboring countries believe we are sharing the benefit of the Volta Dam and our strategic positioning in the center of West Africa in terms of power with them, they are comfortable. If they begin to think we are being selfish, denying them, then they'll start thinking of themselves.
Of course, they need to.
They need to.
And that will be very important. But I just want to find out the other contribution to our power generation. And for example, Bui has been lost in this conversation. And I know that Bui was set up as a peaking dam.
Yes.
And our load peak usually in the evening, where Bui is expected to come on stream. What is the state of Bui now?
Well, Bui, there was an overdrafting of Bui late last year to now. So Bui's generation has to slow down, and it's slowing down. Because if it doesn't slow down, then the reservoir will run out. So Bui's contribution now is, in terms of quantum, is going down. But Bui has a challenge. ECG is Bui's only off-taker. And when ECG is unable to pay, in fact, there have been months when Bui has had to take a bank overdraft to pay salaries.
Because ECG was unable to pay them.
Pay them. Or they are paying them less than 40% of their invoice prices. And so the bigger problem of liquidity, of finance, of cash would have to be looked at far more seriously than we are doing.
You have been in a position of authority in terms of our power sector before. And is it the case that as a country we have failed to plan ahead of time, that we've been exposed because of our inability to procure fuel and because some of the plants are out of service? Is there lack of planning on the part of successive governments?
We have been too complacent. As a people, I won't even say as government, we have always seen power as a social right, rather as an economic good. When we see power as an economic good, then the question of cost recovery, the question of efficiency of use, even in our homes, and that is why I say, as a people, if we see that, then we treat power and power-related issues as business. Unfortunately, we have treated power as a public good.
And it's become a political tool too.
And it's become a political tool. And so we will have to take a second look. This country cannot develop without power. Indeed, for us as NDC, the power situation is so critical to the success of our 24-hour economy. It's so critical. And my hope and my prayer is that by the grace of God, the next government should be NDC, but that government must address the power issue as the number one priority, above all else.
Even though there are bigger challenges waiting for the next government in 2025 in the power sector.
Precise, the debt stockpile.
Right.
Remember, a number of these restructuring, haircuts and all the rest will kick in the next 4 years.
Yes.
So there is already that. And this is, the debt stockpile is far, far more serious than what President Kufuor did to President Atta Mills. Signing the single spine, but leaving it to be implemented by the next government. It's going to be such a Herculean thing, the debt stockpile. So Ghana is going to need a lot of international goodwill to further restructure that debt. Other than that, there will be no fiscal space whatsoever for anything. So it is important that we are aware that we are digging a pit for, irrespective of which party wins the 2024 election. My prayer and my belief is that it's the NDC. But irrespective of who wins, the challenges ahead will be peculiar.
But for the immediacy, and for those who are watching us and they're about to leave their offices and head home, and then the expectation that they will go and meet light or electricity, for the immediacy from now to, let's say, for the next 2 months, what should be government role? What should be the power players' role to ensure that we have some semblance of reliability in our power supply?
Well, the players and the ministry, to an extent, alluded to the fact that they think within a month
this will be resolved.
This will be resolved.
From where you sit as an expert in this area, is it feasible?
No, I'm a student of energy policy. I don't like the word expert and how it is used in this country. I'm a student of energy policy. It's going to be very challenging to meet that. It's ambitious. Let's hope they are able to do it. Because the finance crisis, the money to buy fuel, and this would have been far worse than it is, but for the fact that we have domestic, about 70-80% of our natural gas is domestic. If we had the previous situation where 100% was imported, the load shedding would have been worse than we've ever had. Thank God, because of the work done by previous administrations, we have domestic gas. But even the 20 to 30% that we have to pay for is a challenge. Mind you, even with the domestic gas, ENI gas, government has had to pay for it.
Right.
So the financial health of the energy sector, at best, I would say it's in intensive care.
Which may not be resolved in a month, as promised by
the
government.
Unless there is a huge diversion of funds from other places in the budget just to buy fuel.
All right. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Dr. Kwabena Donkor is a member of the Mines and Energy Committee, former Power Minister, and the Member of Parliament for Pru East in the Buni East region of the Republic. We will take